Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Live Free Now show, bringing you the news, views, tips, and tools you can use to live a free, prosperous, and healthy life. Today's program is going to be a great one. We're going to be joined by the one, the only Henna Maria. Henna Maria is from Finland. She's a total badass. If I could describe her in just a couple words, it would be total badass. She has organized like this 900 plus person parallel society. It's a private membership association. They're doing all sorts of solutions focused agorism and connecting and supporting one another, entrepreneurship, arts, eating well. She's also a shaman, and she's got some great stories about her spiritual journey and how she discovered Jesus Christ. Her and her awesome husband, Rich, got to spend a lot of time with them down at the People's Reset. As you can see, I'm broadcasting from the office because the studio next door, the computer is kind of jammed up and it's at the shop. But we do have the one, the only across the hallway, Manitty.
What up, y'all? What up?
How are you?
Doing good. Feeling energized and enlightened, even though I haven't really been sleeping that well, but I feel good.
He's feeling enlightened.
The main reason I was just super emotional this morning because I was listening to the intercessions of Father Seraphim Rose and how he's interceded between people and Christ when people pray to Father Seraphim Rose to pray to Jesus because his words or his prayers, are very, very meaningful to Jesus since he's already in heaven. So I was just listening to a lot of those stories and accounts, and it made me very emotional and very connected this morning.
He's tapped in.
Why
don't you share just a bit about your rigorous Lent thing? I'm doing a Lent too. No booze. That's all mine is though. No booze. More praying. Trying to be a good Christian, be a good person. But Ryan's going all in, all orthoed. And we're going to talk about all JC with Henna Maria as well. But you just went all in like 110%. What's that all about?
Yeah, so I went all in for the Orthodox fast. And, one thing that I'm keeping in mind is, there's no meat or animal products allowed unless it's shellfish, because shellfish back in the day were regarded as, peasant food. They used to feed lobster to prisoners because they regarded it as, just a sea bug, if you will. So shellfish is allowed, but other than that, no animal products, dairy, eggs, nothing like that. So I'm basically doing a vegan diet with some shrimp here and there.
For those of you that know Ryan, you know the irony of Ryan going vegan, right?
Right. Because I eat at least 2 pounds of beef a day and usually 9 eggs in the morning for breakfast. So my body was not ready for veganism at all. And so it's been a rough transition, but I feel like it's finally starting to adapt. And, I'm getting into a better place. But yeah, so the Orthodox fasting rules, I've been eating primarily plant-based with a little bit of shrimp, but I've also taken a step further. One thing that I like to use at work that makes me a little bit more productive is nicotine. So I have these little nicotine lozenges that have really clean ingredients, or sometimes if I'm being a sinner, then I'll have some Zins. If you guys know what Zins are, they're like these little nicotine pouches, and you can actually swallow them. It's not like chewing tobacco where you have to spit it into a bottle or something like that. You can just swallow the you don't have to spit. You can swallow. Lord forgive me.
Lent. We're not going to make jokes like that, Ryan.
But yeah, so I gave up nicotine. I gave up booze. I gave up
caffeine.
Gummies. We've got these amazing gummies at Brave Botanicals. Yep, those are the ones right there. if gummies are allowed during your Lenten fast, then go pick yourself some gummies up from what is it?
FreeD8gummies.com.
FreeD8gummies.com. Get yourself a 2-pack. Try them out.
Should still work.
Yeah. So
go live in sin and get some gummies.
So no gummies for me, no booze, no nicotine. Trying not to swear, although that's the hardest one. I definitely have a potty mouth, so I'm working on that. But I'm also praying. I have it set for an hour after I wake up and an hour before I go to bed. Although I haven't been hitting the full hour. So
an hour of prayer.
Cut out the cursing and do some more prayer time. But yeah, that's where my heart is during Lent. And those acts in of themselves don't bring me closer to Christ, but they remove a lot of distractions from living a more Christ-centered life. So I think that's really where the focus is for Lent. And it's supposed to be 40 days long, like Jesus fasted in the desert and everything like that. So, and one thing that I'd like to say is that, John, you brought up, like, this is nowhere in the Bible that there's Lent or anything like that. Well, actually, so I've been reading this book called Orthodox Dogmatic Theology, which is by he's called Protoprester Michael Podansky, I believe his name is. And the book is actually translated by Father Seraphim Rose. And what he says is that the church was crucial for the Christian faith because it handed down a lot of the teachings that were being persecuted at the time. Christians were being heavily persecuted in the early days. So the churches actually Orthodoxy passed down these sacred teachings like baptism and some of these other things that are conducted into churches. They actually would kick people out who weren't baptized into the church during certain parts of the service because they were for Christians only. So they handed down these sacred apostolic traditions through the church. That's why the church was so crucial. And when it comes to Lent, it's one of those sacred apostolic traditions that we fast for 40 days, just like Christ, right before Christ is risen.
But did the apostles in the Gospels didn't do that for 40 days?
So that's what I'm saying with the churches, is that the churches hand down these, like you like to talk about that the secret teachings. Jesus had these secret teachings that were only for his inner crew. Well, that's what the church passed down.
So you are a secret teachings guy now.
So the secret teachings are more available and people know about them now. But back in the early days, they had to be more secretive. Like I said, they kicked people out of churches during certain parts of the sermons or certain parts of the church service if you weren't baptized. So they had to be more secretive about it back in the day because there were harsher penalties like death.
Right on. All right, Rye Guy. Okay. Thanks for the update. We're Lenting out.
Thanks for the update, Rye Guy. We're moving on. What do you want to talk about, John? Building 7?
We're Lenting out for 40 days, 40 nights, wandering through the wilderness.
Lent.
Doing battle with your own.
Lent. You're in on Lent too.
I'm doing a no booze for Lent.
No booze.
A no booze. And I wasn't like a total booze hound, but I would drink. And then I've always been the type where, like, once I have 2 or 3, then I want to have more. Or it's like, let's just split a 6-pack. And then we have those 3 and 3. And then it's like, might as well go pick up another 12. And anyway, it just would take me off my groove. So, and it would be like giving into the flesh and pleasure of the body rather than the spirit and the path that I'm on. And we got a lot of good work to do. So I'm trying to just hone in on doing the work that I've been put on this planet to do. And anything that takes me away from that, what greater opportunity than Lent when all the Catholics and the orthos are going in. So I'll give it a shot. My family was always Catholic too, so they were all excited for me to join as well. Okay, cool. But I am still eating meat. Except on Friday, I'm going to be in solidarity with the Catholics.
Hey.
And eat fish. Well, Dan Kennedy, our marketing... This guy, he's an extremist. He's an extremist, but we love him. The Dan Kennedy, my marketing guru, he was like, McDonald's came out with the McFish sandwich, and they started it at restaurants where there's a heavy Catholic population. And it started out as a Friday thing, and then it caught on. And they're like, let's just do it all across, because they were losing business on Fridays.
That's when I was being raised Catholic. Like it would have to be like a sacrifice, right? Like Friday, no meat. It's supposed to be a day of fasting and reverence for the Lord. But instead, we would just go to a fish fry, like a beer battered fish fry, and get like 3 rounds of fish, walk out stuffed,
wasted.
That was like our sacrifice for God. Like, I mean, come on.
All right. One of these days, we'll do an Ortho Catholic death match live on the show.
Hey,
this is episode number 199, I should say. Episode 199. It is 11/11 right now. Angel numbers. That's actually the date that Beck and I were married. 11/11.
That's my brother's birthday.
2 or 3 years ago. So we got the 200th episode coming up next week. We're going to do something crazy. Don't even know what it is yet, but it's going to be like insane. Maybe we'll even be back in the studio. Anyway, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We are going to be joined here by Henna Maria in just one sec. But I wanted to just drop in like 3 or 4 minutes here. We'll be joined by Henna Maria. So I know you guys are here to hear from her. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I'm going to hit a quick conspiracy corner. It's going to be a quick one. And we'll keep Ryan up for this one, actually. So let's share the screen here. We're going to head over to
the conspiracy corner.
Yeah.
Conspiracy.
We got to hit the conspiracy corner. So we're hitting Concorn.
Oh, I just want to say that Patricia, one of our viewers, I recently had a call with her, and she said, oh, and I love the conspiracy corner. I was like, yes, it's catching on.
We're trying to grow the podcast, guys. So if you like it, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and just spread the word. All right, here we go. So this is the conspiracy corner. We're going with the classic. It had to be quick, too, because we're going to have Henna Maria on for most of the show. But what better conspiracy than this? Let me know in the chat if you know what's going on here. What is this? What are we looking at? Let us know in the chat. We got a bunch of people tuned in live. Let me know in the chat what we're looking at. Surely you guys know. Who's Shirley? Uh-oh, the feed's jammed up. That's some NSA, New World Order. The funny thing is, all right, so we're looking at Building 7, 47-story skyscraper that collapsed 7 hours or so after the Building 1 and 2 collapsed, World Trade Center, of course, in on its own footprint. Basically a complete vertical, symmetrical collapse. Impossible for there to be isolated fires cause this kind of collapse, not to mention the squibs, which are like the columns being blown out. Anyway, I've been a 9/11 truther since 2002, so right after it happened. And early on, when YouTube was starting to become a thing, these videos were everywhere, all over YouTube. Then slowly but surely over time, they started to get scrubbed. So it's pretty wild to see how the memory hole works live and in action. And there's even more. Like, here's another one. Richard Gage is a total badass. He's done a lot of work. This actually might be a new one. Let's check this one out full screen real quick. And then we'll gear up for our guest. So here we go. We're going to watch this and listen real quick. Conspiracy Corner. Come on, Ryan.
Conspiracy Corner.
This is World Trade Center 7 just before it collapsed on September the 11th, 2001. It had not been hit by an aircraft. It had been damaged by falling debris and fire. But by 5:20 p.m., most of the fires had been extinguished. Although the building was 47 stories high, it doesn't fall sideways, nor collapse unevenly. For this to have happened, all of the building's vertical supports must have given way at almost exactly the same time. Yet the Federal Emergency Management Agency reported that the collapse was due primarily to fire. But what does it look like to you? the National Institute of Standards and Technology still rules out a controlled demolition. So the question is, do you believe what you can see with your own eyes, or do you believe what you are told?
Good line. All right. Okay, so we just had to do an oldie but goodie for Conspiracy Corner. Henna Maria popped in. She's like, what am I getting myself into? She's about as down as they come, this Henna. I'm a big fan, and we got to hang out at the People's Reset, and I'm very inspired by the work that she's doing. So let's go ahead and bring her here to the stage. Henna Maria, how are you?
Hey, John. Hey, Ryan. I'm fantastic. Great to be here with you guys.
Glad to have you.
Where are you tuning in from today? Where are you joining us? I know you're a world traveler.
Yeah, I'm actually in the Andes of Peru in the Sacred Valley.
Okay, cool. That's where y'all have a piece of land, huh?
Well, actually, our land is in the jungle. So
Okay.
in the northern Amazon outside of Quitos. So if that says anything, we normally, after we've spent some time in the jungle, we come here to the mountains to kind of decompress and acclimatize, because it's very intense in the jungle under the canopy with all the insects and the heat. And, you know, as a Finn, I'm much better in the cooler climate. So we tend to always come to the mountains and just, the fresh mountain air is just like the perfect way to kind of wrap it up.
Cool.
And then we're heading to Finland next week again.
All right. Okay, well, I want to go on a journey with you and introduce our viewers to what you have going on and pick your brain about all sorts of stuff. So why don't we start in the beginning, in Genesis or with John? No. Can you share how you got started with activism? Because you got quite the prolific activist career doing all sorts of stuff. How did you, when did you wake up red-pilled, and just give us that little jam there?
Well, I think, like with everyone, my awakening has come in stages. First major one was actually when I moved to the States when I was 18. I was a bit of a free thinker and kind of a strangeling ever since I was young. So I actually dropped out of high school when I was 18 in Finland. I moved to the States, and I went to work in Starbucks, believe it or not. So anyway, this was all because my first love was American. So I quit school, and against my parents' advice, I moved to the States. Anyway, that whole like paradigm shift was massive for me, like completely different culture. And then what really struck a chord with me was the difference in media. So I came from a little town where we had 3 television channels. And then suddenly I'm in the States where, if you had cable TV, you had like 2,000 channels. And so this really had a big impact on me. And actually what we would do with my older brother, we'd compare the news. Like we would say like, okay, what's broadcasting in the Finnish news this week? And then I would tell him what's like being shown in the American news. And then that, like when I was 18, this is when I realized that media is is propaganda. And it's always like from the point of view of where you are, whatever is like advantageous for that country to be sharing the story of. So there were some illegal bombings, I think, of Iran happening at the time. This was 2004 by American pilots. And this was like all over the news in Europe and especially in Finland. And not a word in the American media, at least in the mainstream media that I was seeing. So yeah, that actually made me stop watching television, being exposed to the American TV. So that was a good one. And then after that, I think I was very aware that things are not what they tell us that they are. And of course, I had my first contact with homelessness also, living in outside San Francisco in Daly City. And that was something I couldn't understand. Like, how can we live in a society where there's such a drastic like difference of economical well-being, and that's not something that I'd ever seen before, in Finland. Because there's some benefits to having a socialistic government and having like welfare payments enough for everyone to have a home. And first of all, it's a cold climate, so you can't really have people living on the streets, you know, so there's a home for everyone. And I actually started doing this thing, just asking from my boss from Starbucks that can I take like whatever leftover, like we have pastries and sandwiches and stuff at the end of the day, like can I just go to Castro and that area and just bring it to all these homeless people? And she was like, yeah, sure. So I started doing that, and I didn't even think to be afraid. That's so funny. Like this small town Finnish girl, 18. I'm like by myself wandering around in the dark in the Castro district, handing out like blueberry muffins to the homeless people. So, but it was pretty amazing because I really, I got to see a lot of things that I would have never gone to experience if I continued living like the normal way in Finland. And it just continued on from there. When I moved back to Finland, I went to work for Amnesty International, and I was doing all different kinds of campaigning there. And the whole question of refugees came up. Yeah, and then eventually I got into animal rights, and it's just been like level after level after level of awakening to all the different issues of our modern society and our culture.
Awesome. And so when did you wake up to the whole, because I met you through Derek Bros and the People's Reset.
Mm-hmm.
And so when did you kind of get red pilled about, and I like how you said, like, it's always just a series of waking up. You never really are awake and it's done, right?
Yeah.
It's a process. What made you realize like, whoa, this great reset thing, or there's like a more of a sinister conspiracy at play behind the scenes? Because I understand that's really helped to inform your activism more recently.
Yeah, I would say that it was when I met my husband, Richie. So that was coming up to 12 years ago now. And he'd been awake since the 90s. And I was already aware of all these different human rights issues and animal rights issues and environmental crises and all these things. And then when I got to talking to him, he was the first one who, started telling me about, have you looked into all these like false flag events that are happening? And like all these school shootings and 9/11, obviously. And just conversation with him, it was evident. I'd never been, if someone said to me, hey, did you ever hear about this? Like, it's possible that this was staged. I've never been the kind of a person that would immediately say like, no, that can't be. I'd always be like, oh, tell me more. And so then we dove into all these videos, as you do, into the rabbit holes. And I was just mind blown. And it was evident to me, like cause and effect and all the evidence like and because I hadn't been watching TV, I wasn't brainwashed. I didn't have this programming so heavily in me. So I was very open-minded and able to receive a lot of this new information. And then, of course, another whole aspect of my awakening is when I went on the path of healing myself and then realizing what effect like personal trauma has on family unit. And then from there, the community and the larger society and our culture as a whole. So I would see that there's multiple levels like through which we can kind of see the modern society and culture, and one of them is actually the influence of trauma and multi-generational trauma, and then how that drives people to act and how that puts the cognitive dissonance on full mode for most people, because as long as you're not looking at what's within and the darkness and the shadow that dwells within, it's very difficult to look outside and recognize it outside of yourself. So because I was on a path of healing, it was easy for me because I was looking into the shadow within myself. I would say that I was equipped to face that level of truth, the harsh truth about our reality. Yeah.
I love that, because a lot of people don't have a spiritual foundation or even like a secular self-development kind of foundation, right? And then when they're met with this giant red pill, it's just like a total shock. Like, were you just blown away and angry, Ryan, when you learned about? I know that I was angry about 9/11 and all the wars and stuff, and it was like this rage. And I think I've transmuted that, alchemized it into like productivity, and like the outlet is to create. But originally I was really pissed off. I get the feeling you were probably pretty pissed off, huh, Ryan?
Yeah, I think that's how most truthers, quote unquote, kind of start out, is from a place of curiosity, but then it maybe devolves into a evangelistic paranoia kind of thing, where you're just, preaching to all of your friends and family members about, you have to believe that there's this guy, Jeffrey Epstein. That was me. So in 2018, I had found out that there was this guy, Jeffrey Epstein, and he had an island called Little St. James, and he was flying kids there. And there were elites from all over the world going there and doing these satanic pedophilic rituals. And so I was telling my family members and my friends, like, they're pedophiles, are going to Little St. James and they're raping kids. And they're like, dude, I don't want to hear this, even if it's true. And so, like, there's a way to communicate it to people, and there's a way to make people abreast of that information. But when you're first starting out, you're all like angry and paranoid, and you want to tell everybody about it so something can be done about it. But that's at least how I started out.
Yeah, it was much the same for me. But so, Henna, you had a little bit more of, a sense of self, or like a little more of that spiritual underpinning. And then you learned about it. So you're like, okay, I'm equipped better to manage this, to skip that angry phase. And it's an evolution, and everybody goes through that evolution. It has meaning, and there's a role in it. Okay, so let's talk.
I had anger. I was
He's like, don't get me mistaken.
Yeah, wait a second here.
John and Ryan, like it's not, it's that holy wrath, it's I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy because it's anger is a sign that a sacred boundary is being broken. And so for me, every time I learn another layer of like what's actually going on, and the latest one for me is geoengineering, like in the last couple of years, like really coming face to face with that. That was a big one. And I'm now like coming out of the rage phase with that. So, but it would always be a catalyst for me. Like whenever I see like, wow, this thing is happening and nobody's talking about it, then I would be like, okay, what can I do? And I'd go on action mode. So I do think, like what you were saying, if you can alchemize it, if you can take that anger and then use it as this like fierce fire that drives you to act, then it can be your friend. It can be an ally.
How far do you think that goes, Henna, the chemtrails? Because there's people that are just like, all right, it's silver oxide and aluminum, and they're like poisoning us with that. But some people go as far to say as like, there's like, what's it called? Like Magellans or something like that.
Oh,
like these like little
Morgellons. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Morgellons, that there's Morgellons in there, and they're making fibers, and they're creating this artificial you inside of you already right now, and you got to try and get them out. And how far do you take it?
Well, yeah, man. The thing is, I met a man who's now been 3 years studying samples of the SAI fallout, the stratospheric aerosol injection fallout. It's a real thing. And he actually is a Canadian man who got in touch with me in the beginning of the pandemic saying, look, this is what could be causing all the respiratory symptoms that I've been studying these samples, and it's very alarming. Would you have time to chat with me? And he said he basically tried to reach as many like high or like public activists as he could, and hardly anyone took the hook, like hardly anyone actually responded to him. It was Clive de Carl and me were the only two activists that actually responded to his inquiry. And I said, yeah, I'm interested to know more. And he actually ended up like flying from Canada to Spain saying, I'm here now because I want to meet you in person. Like he literally came for that purpose without even knowing if I was going to say yes. But he was like, I want to show you, how do I collect the samples? And I want to show you like from your own bodily fluids, what's inside of you. So I was like, yeah, okay. So this guy is called Franz Freisel. And he was one of the presenters of the Clear Skies conference that I put up last year. Around this time of the year, I organized this whole like 2-day geoengineering online conference. And so he was one of the
Amazing.
main presenters. And yeah, he came into my home. He took samples from plants. He took samples from my saliva, from my eye, from my urine. And then we looked at it from the microscope. And yes, there are fibers. There are fibers that they're spraying. There are metal particles. There's all sorts of caustic salts that are causing the fact that humidity is being trapped in the atmosphere, which is creating drought in Spain, in southern Spain. There's over 500 different weather programs happening at the same time all around the world. And they're all slightly different. They're using different kinds of chemicals and metals and salts. It's not all the same. They all have different purposes. Yeah, some is to ionize the atmosphere and create a better like internet coverage. Some say that there are self-organizing particles, and he did actually show me some of the samples that he had that were metallic particles, that if you agitate them a certain way with a magnet or with an electrical current, that they do start to move around and create these chains. So we don't know. Like we honestly, like, I don't know how insidious it is, but I do know that there's particles, like for sure. I've seen it in my own body. I've seen it in my garden, and I see the effect in my plants, like what's actually happening when they spray a lot, increased fungus.
Did she freeze for you, Ryan?
What's that?
Oh,
Did I freeze? I thought you froze.
no, we're all back.
It was everybody.
We're all back.
We're getting too close to the tip of the spear
Well,
here.
I mean,
guys.
I will say that, you know, I had actually not gotten COVID for a while, for the first 2 years, because, you know, there was like this adage out there that those who don't believe in it don't catch it. Like that's the best defense to not getting COVID, is to not believe in it. Because it seems like everybody who believed in it were the ones that were getting it, but the people who didn't believe in it, they weren't getting it, which was my case.
My uncle tried that defense and he died with COVID, of COVID. I don't know, from the respirator. They put him on a respirator. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, to sully my point. But you know, so one day there was such a heavy chemtrail operation going on in Central Texas, and the next morning it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was driving to work, and I had the windows down because it was like nice. It was like 75 degrees or something like that. And so I had the windows down, but it was so thickly foggy. And, you know, mind you, it was just heavily chemtrailed the day before. And so it was so thickly foggy, and I'm driving to work for like 40 minutes with the windows down. By, you know, 3 hours later, I had just gotten in my work truck, you know, after loading it and everything. I had just gotten my work truck to start the day. By the time I get to my first stop, I am like heaving, and like my head feels like it's going to explode. And I drove my work truck immediately back. I didn't even service the first stop. And I was like, I need to go home. And so I went home and I fasted all day and grounded and got a ton of sunlight. And, you know, praise be to God, I was good from there on out. But actually my girlfriend at the time, she had gotten super, super sick, and she didn't do any of the grounding. She just wanted to stay inside and, you know, just kind of lay in bed all day. Well, she ended up being super, super sick for an entire week, to the point where we were totally opposed to going to any hospital, but it seemed like she needed to go to the hospital, but we still didn't take her to the hospital because there's so much paranoia around the hospital, like John was saying with his uncle. Yeah. So I had developed the thought from there on out, you know, without having all this research. And like you just said, this gentleman, he was saying that it causes some respiratory issues. I had thought that COVID was being chemtrailed onto us. I thought that that was the most likely explanation after that, because I had directly experienced it.
There goes the YouTube feed.
This is a big topic, guys. How deeply do we want to go into this? But yeah, it's, I mean, COVID, coronavirus, virus of the crown, I think it's a lot to do with consciousness and a lot to do with like the information we were taking in and being polluted and poisoned on every which way, like through food, water, air. It's such a insane thing that we all went through. But I will tell you, if you get that first symptom of like a tickle at the back of your throat and the like feeling a little bit of like glass inside your lungs or something, that's normally a sign that it is it's a particle pollution, that you're taking in these like alien particles. I don't mean alien as in extraterrestrial.
Right.
I mean foreign particles. Just to
your
clear.
body.
One of the best remedies for that is pine bark extract. And this has worked for me every single time, 100% of the time. What you do is you gargle with it. You gargle with it and it actually dissolves these little like fibrous things that come in. And then you drink it like 3 to 5 times a day, little shot. You can make it yourself. It's not the outermost part of the bark. There's all sorts of recipes for that online as well. It's the kind of the wet, like skin colored layer that's in between the actual tree trunk and the outer bark. And there's certain types of pine that are best for that. But that is the best like remedy when it comes to these chemtrail poisoning symptoms.
I just dropped a line in our community group for our little Radical Roots Ranch, because we're here in Central Texas. It's called the Lost Pines Forest. There was a giant fire several years ago, and the forest actually was almost completely lost. But there's a giant pine tree on our property, so that could be something. We're looking for things that we could make on the property to sell to help subsidize and fund some of our projects and stuff. It was Dr. Zach Bush actually pointed out early on in the COVID stuff, his belief, because, he does a lot of the biome and microbiome and the connection between the biome and the soil and the food and our bodies. And it's all one system. And then he was also pointing out, whatever, virus, no virus. But he was saying like viruses are everywhere all the time, just floating around. And one of the things that his original thesis was, because there's so much pollution, and if you notice, COVID is happening strong. It's having more of an effect in the big cities because they're more polluted. It's his belief that viruses create genetic updates in the human species, and those genetic updates are transmitted and transferred amongst ourselves, and they change and get our bodies to adapt to be able to cope with the new toxins and the new smog and pollution and stuff. I thought that was pretty fascinating. But to what you guys were saying too, Alex Zek, he's a big no virus guy. You're probably familiar with Alex Zek, right? You went to Confluence. Yeah. That's where we were hanging out before too.
Yeah.
I remember one night I got a little whiskey drunk. I think I was being a little silly.
I think
y'all were very forgiving.
Particles too.
Yeah, the whiskey particles were in my lungs. You guys ever vaped whiskey? I'm just kidding. Anyway, let me get back on thought. Zach is a no virus guy. In fact, he's a militant no virus guy. Maybe he's toned it down. Anyway, he's very passionate about the no virus thing. And their whole thing is like, this is all just like this idea virus that when someone's there and you see it on TV and it's like COVID, virus. If any show is going to get pulled, I don't even know if they still pull shows on YouTube. It'll definitely be this one. Virus, COVID. And then people are like, oh, there's a COVID virus and a pandemic. And then someone gets sick and then you're in their household and you're like, I was told that I was going to get sick if I'm around people. Who knows how far it goes. But
I'm in that camp as well, I have to say. And my understanding comes from more the indigenous practice of medicine and how they literally do not have such they don't have a concept for a virus. All the healers that I've met here, they see that nature is a benevolent, loving, it's our home, and whatever happens to us is either that we are going through a detoxification kind of a process in our body. So whenever we're building up fluids, where we're coughing, there's snot coming out of our mouths, if we have diarrhea, whatever, we're expelling toxins. It's a cleaning symptom. Or we're being poisoned, which is again when the body is trying to clean. So whatever is happening to us, those symptoms are always cleaning symptoms. So they don't have microscopes. They don't have these all these ideas and names for things that they're very grounded and down to earth. And they're like, okay, this is what's happening. Your body seems to be excreting all these things. So there's something wrong in the inside. What can we do to help your body find homeostasis and balance again? So how can we nourish your body? How can we make sure you have enough fluids? And how can we aid this detoxification? And then there's plants for all of this. So if we didn't have the idea that there is this invisible thing called a virus, which is not dead or alive, it's a very strange thing when you really go into the like, what does it mean? What does that word mean? Originally, virus meant poison. So if we talk about virus in the etymology of like the original meaning, that is poison, then I'm 100% in agreement that yes, there is poisons in this world. But I don't, to me, it doesn't resonate. It doesn't make sense to me that there are these strange little invisible particles which are everywhere and are somehow hostile. But then again, they're not hostile. Like it's so inconsistent, even the definition of a virus. But what I've seen is that anyone who has, quote unquote, the COVID, like here in Peru, when they've gone the indigenous medicine way, they've always been cured. And when they've gone into a hospital, a lot of them have died or come out much worse with like all these like long COVID symptoms and stuff. One of my good friends here, our teacher, is a medicine practitioner. He was going into the hospitals. He's a local Peruvian jungle guy, and he's been practicing medicine for over 20 years, like indigenous medicine. And he would go into these COVID wards where people were in isolation. And he would get them out of bed and get them out of the hospital with plants and with prayer. And he would say that the minute you're plugged into these ventilators, that's like the death sentence. Because it was actually that it was in your blood. It was the fact that your blood wasn't able to take in the oxygen because it's being poisoned. So if you put the ventilator in, it completely overwhelms your lungs because it was never about your lungs. It was about your ability of your blood to take in oxygen. So he would have all these different medicines and antiparasitic remedies, all plants that he would administer to people. And he would say within days, like sometimes within hours, he would get people even out of coma. So like, this is happening, this is real. But the sad fact is that in our modern societies, we've lost this knowledge of how to use the wisdom of Mother Earth, our original like pharmacy, living pharmacy, to heal and purify our bodies.
I love it. Okay, let's get into that indigenous wisdom. First, let's shout out some of our viewers. We got Alpha Warrior with a nice comment here. Henna is the bomb. John's okay too. I agree. The planter says the rabbit hole is seemingly bottomless. I don't even know how deep it goes. I try to be like rational and no, we just have like
I think there is a bottom to it.
Hell?
No. The bottom of the rabbit hole is Jesus Christ.
JC. All right, we're going to get into JC. We're going to get into JC. We also got Michael Mankinder, a huge supporter of the work we do with the Freedom Cell Network. He's asking, have you communicated with Renette Seenum and Jim Lee's SaveOurSkies.org? Wasn't that the name of the conference you did?
No, it was Clear Skies Conference. Yeah.
Have you connected with these folks?
I'm aware of them. Yes, I'm aware of them.
Cool. Excellent. And then Lightheart on the chemtrails. Here in northern New Mexico, they seem to be spraying more recently. And each time after I've developed respiratory issues like never before. So tragic. Why more all of a sudden, I'm wondering. You know, the funny thing is all these Trump folks were like, they ended US aid and now the chemtrails are done. And you like look up in the sky, you're like, I don't know about that. I don't know why more Lightheart. Anybody got any insight? I don't know that I've seen it more here in Central Texas, but who knows? Okay, all right, let's get into indigenous wisdom. So, and I want to talk about ayahuasca, and I want to not a debate or anything, but Ryan has very firm opinions about plant medicine and like them channeling demons. And I know that you have experience personally with that. And I just think it's really cool how when we were having a dinner conversation, you talked about how you and your husband came to Christ. And I thought it was really profound because you are coming at spirituality through this plant medicine thing. And sometimes there's like a dichotomy between this plant medicine, indigenous, mother ayahuasca, and then what many people believe of as Christianity or a path through the church or whatever to Christ. But it sounds like both you two came to Christ through different avenues. So maybe we just start the conversation. Were you familiar with indigenous wisdom and that's what led you to plant medicine like ayahuasca? Or was it somebody introduced you to ayahuasca and then you're like, wow, there's really something to this indigenous wisdom thing?
Yeah, no, it wasn't something, that I was really aware of. I'd heard of, obviously, of indigenous people and the Incas and the Aboriginals, but I never was aware of indigenous medicine until I started seeking, like, what's actual spirituality. I had a spiritual awakening 2011 without the help of any kind of plants or any kind of substances, just a spontaneous opening of my spiritual vision. Some may say the third eye. And I started seeing into the spirit realm in broad daylight. And a lot of what I was seeing was actually very dark. No surprise there, considering the state of our current reality. There is a lot of darkness here. So first I thought, am I going crazy? Like, have I finally lost the plot? But then it felt like, no, there's something to it. Like it seems to make sense that there is this other reality that is interlaced with ours. And so I was able to start tapping into it, and I started journaling, and I started getting a lot of guidance coming in. And I started feeling that a higher intelligence is actually speaking to me. And that was when I went celibate. I stopped drinking alcohol. I was like, okay, I'm going to become a nun. Like I had this huge spiritual awakening.
Wow.
And I thought I just want to devote myself to the divine and learn what this is all about and who we are actually as beings and what is our purpose here. And then, but it didn't quite go that way. I ended up actually moving to London at the time to study theater. And that's when I met Richie, and he had just come back from Peru. And before I met Richie, I was already starting to read about different kinds of pilgrimages and spiritual practices, monasteries. There was also some books that I read that were about spiritual initiations, some kind of spiritual orders, shamanism. So it was already coming into my world because I was looking for the way for me. How can I somehow make sense of what I was going through in the inside? And then Richie had just come back from Peru from his first ever journey with the medicine, with indigenous healers. And he actually shared so Richie's my husband, for those of you who don't know. He shared his diary with me. He read through all the ceremonies and the wisdom and the intelligence. The healing that he experienced in just those 8 ceremonies, it was 2 weeks that he was there, was just nothing short of miraculous. And that shook me to my core. And I knew that, okay, this is something I need also, because I had a lot of unhealed trauma in me. And in fact, when I met Richie and felt true love for the first time in my life, my trauma started resurfacing, and all of my defense mechanisms, all the walls that I'd built to pretend that I was happy and I was enjoying my life, started to just crumble away, and the trauma started to become seen. And yeah, it was then with Richie that I actually went to the jungle for the purpose of my own healing, to face my trauma and all the grief and the self-hatred and the addiction and whatever I'd stored in me, in my being, and to be purified. And yeah, I never even knew that it's possible to purify your soul. We don't know about these things in the West. And I'm not talking about prayer. Prayer is a wonderful thing, but we all, we floss our teeth, we do enemas, we clean our body and our organs. But what about the spiritual emanations of our being? How do we clean our mind? How do we go into the subconscious mind? How do we clean our memory? Imagine if you've been exposed to a lot of violence. How do you clean that imprint from your visionary memory? We don't have tools for that, but we used to. This was the most natural thing that all civilizations across the earth would practice. We had ceremonial healing arts, and in ceremony we could then go in to these ethereal spiritual elements of our being and heal and purify and fortify ourselves. So it's the most natural thing. But I, obviously living in a highly modern society in Finland, and then US, and then London, I never had any contact to this. I didn't even know that it's possible until I experienced it myself, and that changed my life forever.
So would you say And I was thinking when you're talking about the cleansing, like baptism in a way, is that literally and figuratively like a cleansing and a washing away of the old self to receive Christ in the new, it's like a new beginning. Would you say, because you mentioned the divine, right? And people experience or iterate the divine differently.
Mhm.
But when you take ayahuasca, would you say that taps you into the divine? It gives you a glimpse of the divine. You realize, or maybe you realize that there isn't a disconnection between us and the divine. Can you talk about that? And then how would you define divine? Define.
I love this. I have so much to say about this topic because this is my number one passion and calling in life. First of all, I'd like to just make a little comparisons there that when we go into a baptism, let's say we do it the old, like original way where we get submerged in living water and we invite Christ into us, Yeshua Christ, into our being. We get out of there and we've been renewed and we've been blessed and we feel, and I've gone through this myself, by the way, I've done it in living water. After that, I didn't have to how do I say it? After that, it wasn't that I never had to brush my teeth again or that I never had to go to shower again. I still have to keep cleaning myself. And it's the same thing in terms of our minds, our hearts, and our souls. It's different. Like we can give ourselves to Christ, but it doesn't mean that it's a card to get out of maintenance in terms of our spiritual hygiene. So these things are not in the same camp. One thing is to devote yourself to Christ, and another thing is to keep cleaning yourself. And you can do both. And there's no way that they can they don't cross each other out. There's no paradox there. There's nothing that goes against Christ in the practice of cleaning yourself with plants that are created by the divine as well. They are part of this creation. So so what happens with any entheogenic plant? And now I love that term entheogenic because it means it generates the divine within. So it opens the portal. It opens your spiritual vessel so that you can have a direct connection with the divine if you so will. So the thing about these plants is that you can open yourself up to anything that is your intention. And some people, actually, a lot of the secret societies that we all talk about, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Knights Templars, all these different societies, they actually work with entheogenic plants, but they connect consciously and intentionally to the dark side. And they connect to like demonic realms. But if you do it with a sacred way, with a initiated curandero healer, with prayers, with sacred songs, this is an amazing way that you can connect directly with Christ if you want to, or with the spirits of the nature, which are also benevolent, beautiful, divine beings. And so they're like, what people lack a lot is the understanding of actually the vastness of the spiritual realm. That if you think of all the different organisms and creatures and beings that we can see with our naked eye here on this plane of being on Earth, then can you imagine how rich is the spiritual realm? It's not just angels and demons. There's all sorts of beings out there. And just like we can choose when we're on Earth, where do we go? And when we start navigating, we can choose to go to an underground brothel and be met with horrific demonic human beings. Or we can choose to go to a beautiful mountaintop where there is a prayer circle, where we meet like such in lively, inspired spiritual souls. The same is true on the spirit realm. And that's why the one who's leading the ceremony has to have traversed that realm, has to know the world of ayahuasca, where you can go, what kind of beings can come into the ceremony. So you create, it's your responsibility to create a sacred space, a safe space. But this takes years of practice, hundreds of ceremonies, celibacy for years. And sadly, a lot of the modern shamans, these neo-shamans, wannabe shamans, they don't have the skill, they don't have the knowledge to actually be able to even serve the medicine or hold ceremony. They have no idea. They maybe order the medicine online, they put on a CD and they give you a cup and then you're on your own. And yes, when you sit on this wild horse called ayahuasca, and if there isn't somebody guiding the space and guiding the ceremony and singing these sacred songs that are like the beacon of light that keeps you in the sacred frequency, then yeah, you can end up in some very dangerous places. And I see this a lot. We get a lot of people in our retreats who've been damaged because they've gone to a retreat which was just a commercial shit show, to put it bluntly, where there's like 20, 30, 40 people in a ceremony. Guy who's serving the medicine has not been spiritually initiated to be able to do that, who does not have actual permission to hold ceremony. And all hell gets loose. Yeah, so I'm absolutely 100% in agreement with Ryan with that yes, it can be a portal for demons if you don't know what you're doing. It's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, that's what Supplanter here says. Timothy Alberino claims that he's talked to ayahuasqueros who have claimed to see demons enter people who are in entranced state. Can you share? And then I want to hear what's coming up for Ryan as we're sharing all this. Can you share? Because you and Richie told me a pretty intense story, and it was a big eye opener for me. That was more of a confirmation of Jesus Christ being like this really powerful figure. And you said there's all sorts of different spiritual paths and spiritual beings and stuff, but it seems like there's this one that is like especially prominent and plays such an important role. But can you talk about how you and Richie kind of had some experience with some dark forces, and then you experienced Christ's light and grace that helped you, and that really formed this connection? Is that what am I sharing that correctly?
Maybe it's a bit too personal to be sharing online.
Okay.
I share it with you in confidence, John, so you can take it as it's something, a token of our friendship.
Okay.
And I'll be glad to tell that story in person if I meet any of you who would like to meet and know about that experience. But what I can tell you is that all true healers that we met in the jungle all work with Christ, indigenous healers. And our first teacher, Ricardo Amaringo, who's a master Shipibo curandero, he would have next to him a statue of Mother Mary and Christ. And actually, sadly, eventually he took them away because he said that so many Westerners were complaining about it and thought that he's religious. But he still continued to sing for Christ. And he said that there's no connection to the religion and this being that they're purporting to be the Son of God, which is Jesus, and that's not his true name, by the way. This is a whole other creation that the Catholic Church has created called Jesus. And in his name and in his image, they've slaughtered like millions and millions of indigenous tribes, and I mean people and tribes, and completely pillaged their land and destroyed their cultures. And so this creature that they've created has nothing to do with the spiritual being called Christ. So he would say that Christ, like if you truly are pure in your heart and you're seeking to heal, there's no way that you will avoid meeting Christ in spirit realm. And we saw that it doesn't matter what tribe the healer was from, they all worked with Christ. But not just Christ and also spirits of all the different plants and all the different flowers and medicine trees, because they all have a particular frequency, a particular healing song that they carry. So again, it's like, what for me is so funny is that when people find Christ, they think that that's the only good thing that exists in this creation. But what a tremendously impoverished and horrible creation this would be if everything else is evil apart from Christ. What if it's true, which is my experience, that Christ loves all of this creation and he's got so much help and so many allies, so many angels, all the trees know him, they keep his law, they have his breath in them. Like there's a way to love this nature and work with all these different nature spirits and beautiful trees and flowers and herbs, and still love Christ also. This is what I discovered. And this is actually what Christ would teach. The original scriptures, if you look at the Essene Gospel of Peace, you'll find that he talks about how to commune with the trees, how to pray to Mother Earth. So it's not even in contradiction to the original teachings of Yeshua.
Was that found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the piece, the Essene?
No, that's different one. I can show you. I've got it right here. I've got it everywhere I go. I highly recommend, if you love the teachings of Yeshua, the Essene Gospel of Peace. This is 4 books. It's been translated from the Vatican archives by a man called Edmund Bordeaux Zeckley. And in this book, there's some of the same exact pieces of scripture that you can find in New Testament, and then some that are not there. And one is, for instance, the prayer for the earthly mother. And I find it very interesting that that's what's been completely taken out from the original teachings of Yeshua, is his love for Mother Earth. Because we all are, of course, children of earth and heaven, father and mother. We're not orphans. There's no way we could be born if we only had a father. We all need a mother as well.
Sure.
And so this is the indigenous way. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Ryan? Because Ryan's gone on the ortho trail and he's been diving deep with this connection, and I'm really impressed with how deep he's taking it. But what's coming up for you, Ryan? I saw some squirms over there.
Well, I'll say that the Holy Orthodox Church is the original and true Church of Jesus Christ. And I will say it's a little bit contradictory, and I say this with complete love. And Henna, I've really enjoyed the conversation so far. And, you know, I'm just saying these things because I do like to debate and get into things, but I do think it's a little contradictory that, you know, you call out the Roman Catholic Church, which I would also do, but then you present a book from the Roman Catholic archives or the Vatican archives. So I think that's a little contradictory in of itself. And I will say that I think that Christ is the only way, and praying to Christ is the only way. And I don't think that it was Christ's original teaching to love the earth, because in our view, the Orthodox view, that's heretical. You only worship Christ and you pray to Mother Mary and you pray to the saints and holy fathers to pray for us to Christ. And I'll just say, I read this book from Father Seraphim Rose. It's called The Soul After Death, which is a very enlightening book, because I was all on like the New Age spirituality train with near-death experience research and all of those things. And so I was a universalist, where I thought that everybody gets saved after you die, regardless of what you've done on this earthly realm. Well, I was sorely mistaken after reading Father Seraphim Rose's book. A lot of these near-death experiences, people encounter Christ-like beings, or these beings of light that fill them with so much love and radiance, and they are totally transformed by these experiences, that when they come back from these experiences, they're totally headlong into those versions of what they thought Christ was. But what Father Seraphim Rose outlined in The Soul After Death is that's actually not a Christly or Christian death at all. A lot of these were secular or atheists, and they go into the other life and they're shown all of these things that mediums and other spiritistic peoples and teachings that we've seen throughout the New Age are teaching these days. But actually, it's very, very much different for saints, like modern saints, that we can look at there since the 19th century or the 20th century. We have all of these modern saints that when they repose and they come back, there's a much different experience of the afterlife that they experience than these near-death experiences. And, you know, I was just as converted as the rest of everybody. You know, I thought that everybody gets saved. There's 5,000 near-death experience accounts that we can rely on that teach us that we do all get saved and we're all going to encounter Christ. But that's really not the case. And there is heaven and there is hell. And people what you do here matters. And idols, which I believe that plant medicine can be an idol for a lot of people, and other things, if you put that before Christ, or, you know, I will push back that it's a purifying of your soul. I think the only purification of your soul comes through prayer. And just to quote Father Seraphim Rose, he states, Christ is the only exit from this world. All other exits, sexual rapture, political utopia, economic independence, are but blind alleys in which rot the corpses of the many who have tried them. I would also include plant medicines and stuff like that in there as well. I think probably in my opinion, Henna, I think that Christ was giving you, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, was giving you the gifts early on. He gave you the gift of clairvoyance. He made you see all of the demons that are here in our earthly realm. And he was calling you to a life of monasticism and being a nun, it seems like. And it seems like you chose a different path. And that's probably also like part of Christ's plan so that you can do some other work and stuff like that. But I think that prayer and fasting and just total devotion and submission of one's will and soul to Christ is the only way out of this world and into the gates of heaven. But of course, Christ, in his discretion, can choose other beings or other people outside of the Holy Orthodox faith. And he does say in scripture that you're going to be surprised by who you meet at the pearly gates, that there's going to be some Muslims and there's going to be some people who are just pure of heart that Christ has accepted into his kingdom. But I'll stop my soliloquy there and I'll let the conversation unfold.
That's interesting. I met two Christian brothers in 2020 on my way to Peru in the airport, and they prayed for me, and they had the gift of clairvoyance and the gift of prayer. And they started praying without knowing anything at all. We were just queuing to get our passports checked. And Richie and I, because we also walk in the footsteps of Christ, we said, hey, that's so cool that we saw you guys were praying in the airplane. We said to him and his friend, and he's like, oh, would you like us to pray for you? And we said, yeah, sure. He started praying out loud. And he said all these things about me that is like no way, of course, that he could have known. But he also gave premonitions. And he was saying things like, I see that you're a sister in Christ, but your path is very different. That Yeshua has called you on a very, very different path. You go more the mystical Christian path is your path. And that's exactly how I see it. That I'm more in the mystical, like spiritual practice, ritual practice of Christianity. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's more the esoteric heart of Christianity, what I'm practicing. And actually, it's very much like a monastery practice, because my husband and I, we had to spend years in celibacy, although we're married. And we do, like, we don't drink alcohol, we don't eat white sugar, we don't take any kind of drugs, you know, we don't smoke cigarettes. Like, the list is long. We don't eat animals. So if you wanted to like check what kind of is a path of renunciation and path of devotion, then you could check a lot of those boxes actually. So I'm one of recognizing that there's many different ways to walk the path of Christ. And I would never dare to judge anyone's path. So I know that some people are very much into the intellectual and like book religion, but then there's others who are more in the experiential, mystical practice of Christianity. And it's beautiful that we all have a choice, free will choice on how to live our lives and how to walk this path. But I will say that there's nothing heretical or pagan about loving your mother. Just like it's not away from my love for Christ if I say that, hey, I love John or I love Ryan. It doesn't mean I'm a heretic. Or if I say, I love my dog, Angelita and Waiki. That's not away from my love for Christ.
As long as it's not worship.
Yeah,
I would say
that's where
worship
people get
crosses
very
the threshold.
confused. A lot of dogmatic religious people get very confused about love and worship. So what if I say that I love Mother Earth? I love all her plant medicines that help people cure. I've seen so many amazing things in my own home, in my own practice. People recovering from degenerative brain conditions where they could no longer speak in 3 days, recovering another whole language. You know, I've seen people heal cysts and all sorts of like physical ailments with these plants, get out of suicidal ideations and addictions, drug addictions. How could this be against Christ? This is what he did. He was the healer of all healers. And that's why all the healers that I've met in the jungle say, if you're a healer, true healer in your heart, you will meet Christ and he will be with you. And this is what I see. And that's why I don't believe at all. And I denounce and reject such a belief that the only way to heal is through prayer and fasting, because I see that prayer, fasting, and plants can take it even to another level. I see it and I practice and I live it. And so, but each can choose their own path. But maybe one day will come a time where you, Ryan, will say, oh, I need a medicine plant because I'm having symptoms and prayer and fasting is not enough. I need something stronger. I need to purify this poison out of my system. And then you'll have a pine drink, or you'll have adaptogenic mushrooms, or I don't know, valeriana. There's so many different medicine plants. Not all of them have to be psychoactive or entheogenic. We all eat also. We take in wheat. We take in potatoes. Is that heretic as well?
No,
It doesn't.
no. I think to be honest, I think it's like you're kind of bastardizing my point. I'm not saying that any plant material or loving what it can do for you is heretical. What I'm saying is taking ayahuasca or some kind of psychedelic hallucinogenic or whatever, and then meeting an entity and thinking that you're getting profound spiritual insights. I think that is a path that is, you don't actually know what entity you're talking to, in my opinion. And in the Orthodox Church,
no knowledge or experience of that, Ryan. You're only speaking of analytical opinions. You don't have experience. You can't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, if someone experiences the truth through Christ, they're damn certain that I experienced some spiritual entity awakening thing. Same thing. If
that's what I was talking about with the near-death experiences. People are whole hog convinced that they met Christ in this encounter. When a Christian death, someone who is sanctified as a saint in the Orthodox Church, they have a drastically different experience of Christ than what is recounted in near-death experiences.
Well, what makes theirs true and the other one's not?
Yeah,
just identified as a saint?
Because it was someone who had completely devoted their entire life to Christ. And then they actually, what their recounts, and you have to read the book because the accounts are numerous and it's a lot to retell right here. But the accounts of Christians who have died in full faith and service to Christ versus those who have died and come back who have not are drastically different, but both would say that they met Christ. I'd be willing to bet everything that I've got on the former and not the latter.
Betting is not Christ-like.
Uh-oh.
That was a good one.
Never swear either.
Gotcha.
I'm just saying.
So, Ryan, you said that what's his name? The father, John, what's his name? The guy?
Saint Paisios?
No, the other guy that you're reading.
John Maximovich?
St. John Maximovich. You were just referencing his book. You said that you'd be surprised at the pearly gates. You may find a Muslim or whatever that was just so pure of heart. But doesn't that contradict with the only way to the Father is through Christ? And if somebody doesn't actually accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior and admit that he was resurrected on the cross or 3 days after, then why would that would contradict with the only way to the Father is Christ? Because a Muslim obviously went a different path, same Abrahamic religion, but a different path. How is that even so then? That would mean that you don't actually have to be a Christian to make it to heaven. And one more thing, I was at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. And this is when I was still trying to hash stuff out. And I was leaning more towards some of the Christ consciousness stuff, which I still feel has merit and meaning for me. And I asked it was a woman mother. Is that even allowed in the Orthodox Church, or does it all have to be men in the Ortho Church?
What? No.
Okay. What? Why are you acting like that? What do you mean no? So it was a woman, father, priest woman, and this was the English Orthodox.
Oh, well, only priests are men in the Orthodox Church. I thought, right. But there are women saints in the Orthodox Church.
Sure. Well, that's what I was asking. Anyway, So I asked her the same thing. Like, I'm coming to Christ, and my mom had cancer, and I was just, all these things are all coming to the same conclusion for me. But the thing I have a lot of resistance over is it doesn't make sense to me that this one spiritual path is the only way to the divine or to heaven or whatever. It's like, what about even before the Old Testament was even written and this concept of Yahweh was even iterated? There was other concepts, and there was Hinduism, and there was other figures throughout history that have come from the heavens or that have reached this divine union, the union of the divine. And it's like, is it, because I was like looking for a belonging. There's this whole thing in Christianity where it's like, I want to be a Christian, but what does that mean? And there's these initiations and stuff. And so I was still like dealing with that. Anyway, and she was like, you know what? There's a place for you. And she believes, she's like, we believe that Christ is the only way, but as long as you're on the path, as long as you're accepting Jesus into your heart, then I believe that I'll see you there kind of deal, you know? It's just that exclusionary thing that I'm not going to pretend to know what Christ was thinking or what he was speaking, although his words are pretty clear, but who knows how it was changed there. It's like, would Christ really want people to not go through some divine path or like experience fruit? And Ryan always talks about the fruit. Like, how do we judge something in the spiritual, divine, religious, yada, yada, yada? Let's look at people based on their fruit. And I personally got some damn good medicine when I took ayahuasca, like really good, that stuck with me to this day. And it was like pretty profound stuff that I wouldn't have gotten. And I don't know, maybe through like 10 years of prayer or like really diving deep through that path. But I think that there's something to be said about this exclusionary nature. And when I read the gospel and the teachings of Jesus Christ, his actual words in red letters, I don't get the vibe of like, nah, this ain't for everyone. I get the vibe of like, let's love each other, or what he said, the two most important commandments: love God and then love your neighbor like you love yourself.
Many are called, few are chosen, for this exact reason. Not everybody makes it. Most people
the Muslim made it.
Most
according to
people
your guy.
don't make it. That's the sad reality, is because people put idols before Christ.
Which idol?
Any idol. There's
Billy Idol?
Like sexual idolatry, political utopia,
fame,
all of these things. Anything put before Christ is an idol. Christ is number one and should always be number one in your life and in your heart.
So if you've never heard of Christ, you're in a foreign indigenous culture, and there's no missionaries ever came into that zone, but you love one another, you show up for each other, you forgive your fellow tribesmen when there's some kind of conflict. You're doomed to a life of hell?
No.
Afterlife of hell?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, but
I got a book that has the answer.
I think there is an answer. And I think that the Orthodox Church teaches that there are levels of hell and levels of heaven. So I think like the first level of hell really is kind of like just a state of darkness. And when Jesus comes for the resurrection, or he comes back, the second coming, there will be another judgment. And then people like that may be judged in the affirmative and brought to heaven. But I don't exactly know the answer to that question. There are things which Christ has revealed and things that he has not revealed. People, there's the big thing is evolution. People are like, oh, well, evolution definitely happened. It's like, no, it says in scripture that the earth was made in 7 days. And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. Anything else is just a contrived narrative in my view, by Satan and implanted.
So you're a biblical literalist now.
Yeah.
You're advancing fast, Ryan. You're going all in. I love it. Okay. Any closing words here? Ryan and I both been diving deeper with Christ. Ryan's been going super deep with the Ortho Church. So it always gets worked into our show. It's not just like a freedom conspiracy show. And I thought it'd be great to hear your perspective, because you got a lot of great insights and are doing the work there, Henna. Well, let's do some closing thoughts, because I do want to talk about the...
Hold on. One thing that I want to say.
Uh-oh.
I'm seeing Vanessa's comments.
Uh-oh.
Honestly...
Right, let's see Vanessa's comments. I would bet Christ would want to come to all.
And like I said, he calls to us all, but few are chosen. And
I think that also means not putting judgment before Christ.
And I'm not
I
here's
think Jesus
what I
would
want
want
to
us to
say.
love and pray for those we don't agree with instead of judging their path.
I'm not judging anybody's path. I am on my own path, and chief amongst all sinners is myself. I have some profound things that I need to repent over, and I don't know that I will be accepted into heaven. I mean, God willing, I pray to God every single day that I'll go to heaven, but right, I don't deserve to. So I would not judge anybody else's path because my own path is so marred and scarred and beaten and broken. So I don't judge anybody else's path. And I just pray that people eventually put Christ first in their lives. That's all I pray for.
Sounds like you could do with a ceremony, Ryan.
I'm just going to slip it in his drink. I'm just kidding.
I would say that ayahuasca is a moral medicine of that. That's the way I would define it. It helps to see where we've gone wrong, that like the kind of visions. I don't know if you've ever drank ayahuasca, Ryan, but generally what people experience when they first go to ceremony is they are shown the mistakes that they've made in their lives. They're shown the way that they've hurt themselves, the way that they've ignored their loved ones. They are shown whether their lives are actually in alignment with their soul. So are they, for instance, just worshiping money and fame, or are they actually expressing their gifts? And it helps them to return to the good path, the path of love. And that's why, like, I see that this is in 100% resonance with the teachings of Christ. And all these medicines, when they're done in a sacred way. And I see a lot of people who struggle with regret, who are like hating themselves, you know, who struggle with addiction, relationship problems with their family, with their mother and father, you know, come to a place of forgiveness, asking for forgiveness, repenting for their sins, healing their relationships, and then living a life of fulfillment and love. So truly, I see it all the time in my practice, and that's why I say that there's nothing that is contradicting the word or the message or the teachings of Christ, actually, in the path of truly the ceremonial, sacred healing arts, doing it the way that it's been intended to do, not as some kind of like spiritual insatiability or like just looking for a way to escape your life, but truly to actually face yourself and see those aspects of yourself that you may not want to see. That's what the plants actually help to do. They tune the consciousness in a way that you're able to see into the unconscious. And so that's why they're so powerful, and that's why they're coming back strong. And that's why at the same time also Christ is coming back strong. I don't think it's a coincidence that both of these things are coming back and people are seeking, because the way humanity is going, like majority of humanity is going, it's a path of oblivion. Yeah. So I think we actually agree on way more things. Like if we had a chance to really sit down with each other, Ryan, I think you'd, and if you ever read this book, I think you'd understand a lot more what I'm talking about. And you'll feel that this is actually the words of Christ in there. Yeah.
Well, I will say that I think that if we were to hang out for a day, we'd have a gay old time, and that we'd be best friends, and we'd share almost all of the same opinions except for this one, you know? So one thing that I would point people to is Saint Joseph the Hesychast. He was someone that struggled with the sin of lust for like 15 years and battled demons physically in his cell at the monastery that he was at. And after 15 years of gruesome battle with the demons, he finally conquered them, and he never had another impure thought for the rest of his life. But that was through fasting and prayer. So I think that there's different ways to accomplish it. And I think that the longer, harder road is probably maybe the more fulfilling road. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, good stuff. I just want to say that I feel blessed to be part of a community and a movement. No matter what path they're on, we are all on a path trying to become better versions of ourselves and have a deeper connection with one another, with God, with the divine. I think it's an absolutely necessary element of the work that we're doing, going up against this dark juggernaut new world order. Like, we got to have some kind of spiritual foundation, and however that shows up for people is definitely preferable to not having the spiritual foundation. Okay. All right. So speaking of work, here's my segue. And thank you for sharing, both of you guys. And we're having fun here with our spiritual journey.
Totally.
And thanks for being a good sport, Henna. And I hope I didn't betray your confidence earlier with sharing that.
No,
I tried to
no, it's
infer
okay.
in messages before, like, hey, I wanted to share that. So I'm sorry if I caught you off guard with that. And I do.
No worries.
I do feel honored to have shared that with me. It was really meaningful for me too. Okay. Okay, let's talk about this big community that you are a part of building. I don't even want to try to pronounce it, but it's the Finnish word for returning home. Can you share what that's all about, and just really feel free to brag it up, because it sounds like what y'all are doing is like really, really powerful over there in Finland.
Thanks, John. I was thinking, are we ever going to get to this topic? Because I actually posted it on our community network site, like, hey, I'm going to be talking about Kotiinpaluu Heimo tonight, and we're like, here we are, 1 hour later, speaking about Jesus Christ.
It happens.
Exactly goes. Well, anyway, one thing that I love about our community is that we have freedom of religion and freedom of political ideation, because we're trying to build a parallel society. And we figured it out that if we're just going to debate each other and trying to find people who think 100% the same as us, then we've already lost. There's just not even any point to try to organize ourselves. This is, I think, part of the spiritual maturity that is called at this time, in this day and age of humanity, is that we have to come to a place of respecting each other's individual paths, as long as we have some kind of a shared foundation of values. And that's what we have. So we are a parallel society in the making in Finland. We're coming up to 1,000 members now.
Wow.
We've been going for 1.5 years, and not exactly even 1.5 years, 1 year and 3 months. And yeah, where to even start? We are organized so that we are actually all across the country. We have 6 different regions. Each region has their own representative. We use sociocracy in our internal meetings and in our decision-making processes. And then we have a central cell, which is all the representatives of the different regions, all the 6 regions. And then we have also the founding members. We have kind of a board of advisory, which is the central communication hub of this entire nationwide community project, parallel society project. And we have our own website, a bit similar to Freedom Cells or Alex X The Way Forward, if you're familiar with his websites. And that's where we are in contact with each other. We also have a map where you can find all our members. We have a marketplace where we can share all our what we're selling, products and different kinds of services. What else? We have a shared calendar there where we can all upload different kinds of events to different invitations to events and meetings and gatherings that we're organizing. We have working groups. So what we're working on is food resilience and farm collectives. We have a whole initiative around wellness centers and natural medicine practitioners. So the basic foundation with which we have gathered our group together is that we all want to return to the original natural way of life, and we want to create an alternative path to this technocratic, transhumanist, digitalized way that is in the making. And we want to return to feet on the ground, hands in the soil, handmade things, skills and crafts, carpentry, weaving, all this natural medicine, so that we can actually be self-reliant and co-reliant, co-sovereign together. And yeah, that's it. Ask me some questions.
I love it. One thing, and this is something Vanessa's watching, and her husband Danny, because Vanessa's roots are in Mexico. Ven por tu gente para siempre, vatos locos, way. Anyway, and so she has this connection to the indigenous culture there, which is a little more obvious. And then her husband Danny, who was the best man at my wedding, we're super close with them. he was like, well, what about me? Because, you know, I'm European descent, right? But then he got connected with the indigenous cultures where he's from, right? So is there an element of reconnecting with whatever indigenous culture was originally around in that area, the region? Is it all Nordic, right? Like what's the story there? And is that integrated in with this parallel society?
Yes. Yeah, that's it actually. The whole idea is that we guard and we revive, and we co-create like the second coming of the indigenous Finnish culture. And it's still very much present, actually. I would have to say that
Wow.
one of the reasons why I love being there is that you can see it in the people, the way that their connection to the earth is. And this is like the fundamental aspect of the whole thing, is how to actually live in harmony with the earth, and how to see it as a living being, and how to recognize that earth is actually sacred. And so, yeah, we have sauna, which is, well, or sauna, as you guys pronounce it, which was the original Finnish church. That was the temple for all life. That's where women would go to give birth. That's where it was time to move from time to eternity, and it was a dead body. That's where the bodies would be washed, is in the sauna. That's where you'd go to heal if you were ill. You'd take different kinds of remedies, and they do like sauna treatments, and you'd be bathed. And so that was like a central kind of temple in the indigenous Finnish culture. And of course, we had all different kinds of shamanic practices there around how to commune with the forces of the earth. So how do we commune with water? How do we commune with the sun? How do we make fire? And so all of these different skills of how to, communicate and live together with nature, that's what we're trying to revive. And so one thing that we do, for instance, is every full moon, we have a full moon circle. We have all across the country, we have different fire circles. And so we just make a fire and we share stories, we check in with each other. And this is how we are creating the sense of community and belonging, and returning to the more like original rhythm of life, which was, of course, according to the celestial cycles. It was according to the weather cycles, or according to the seasons. So rather than being like a slave to this strange invention of like Roman calendar and hours in the day and clocks and schedules, we're trying to return more to like an earth-based cycle of living.
We were just talking about the silly daylight savings time. I think, I don't know if it was the intention, but there's an element of throwing people off their groove. Even if we're in a groove with like a fake man-made cycle, it's still you lower into that. So you settle into that, and then they throw it off right away. Okay. And so when people agree to be part of this community, this voluntary association, they sign like a social contract. That's like basically a private membership association. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And the terms and agreements, the conditions for joining are all just values. So different ways that we've all agreed that we conduct each other and conduct ourselves. So we have nonviolent communication as one of the conditions. So you have to learn how to not weaponize your word against the other, but stick to the subject matter. So if you have a disagreement, you don't attack anyone's character, you don't curse, you don't attack them, but you respect them as your fellow sister or brother, and then you just talk about whatever that disagreement actually is. So this has been quite amazing, because we have our own little, membership site, which is like our own internal social network. And it's been so beautiful to see like the level of intelligence and maturity in the conversations and the comments. Like we don't have this kind of bashing and arguing and debating happening there, but like people are listening to each other and saying, oh, okay, that's interesting. Like, let's have a dialogue. How do you see this? How do you see that? And it's actually possible to have peaceful communication with each other.
Yeah. And the politics, I think, always throws things off, because it's like a one size fits all. So if my policies aren't going to be forced upon everyone, it's going to be the other people's policies. And I got to fight and argue about that. That's one thing I noticed in Cheran, in Michoacan. They overthrew the municipal government. They kicked out all the cops. They instituted their own indigenous form of government, which also has little regions. There's 4 barrios, they call them, neighborhoods. They also would come around a fire, and that's how they would do their voting. They go around the fire and they decide on which of the elders to lead the community. Anyway, they banned all political signage and propaganda and bumper stickers and anything, because it would pit families against each other. Who you going to vote for in the federal election? Meanwhile, the federal government has nothing to do with you except for corruption, taxation, and stuff. So I thought that was cool. A lot of people are coming back to their own way of doing things. And we always talk about parallel economies, but the real prize is to build a parallel society. And it sounds like you guys are advanced on that front. One thing we found, so we have in Central Texas, in the Freedom Cell Network has like over 42,000 people that have registered on the site. So we like to throw that number around, of course. Now, mind you, it's not 42,000 that are active and meeting up and gardening together, right? In Central Texas, we have a Telegram group of like 750 people or so. But again, the same thing. I would say there's, what do you think, Ryan? Maybe about 50 people that show up regularly, 100 people tops?
If that, yeah. I mean, that's a good question, Henna. How do you activate these people? You know, I feel like these are people who want to be doing those things, but then when it comes to rubber hitting the road, like nobody's showing up.
They showed up during COVID because there was a fire under their ass.
Right. But then now that the foot is off the gas, people are just like, oh, I'm going to chill again.
I'm too busy. I got to work or whatever. How many of the 900 are like truly active? And then like what Ryan was saying, what do y'all see as far as people just kind of pulling back, or they just want to be part of a social media site to share whatever?
It's actually quite it's challenging to estimate, because we have regional communities, and then we have this like overall countrywide network. So yeah, how active are the people? I would say that they're more active actually in the real world and meeting up than they are virtually. That's something that I've noticed. Yeah. Like it seems that a lot of people are just kind of sick of the virtual content and sick of like just writing about things, but more they're about like doing things. So that would be an interesting one to actually check, like how much of our membership is actually organizing in the real world. Because I know that they're doing that a lot. Like they're meeting each other. They're doing like nature hikes. They're organizing different kinds of like markets. But on like our virtual platform, I would say maybe a third of the members is active there. And then the rest of it is more like, more interested in like the real life concrete. How can we actually do something?
Good.
And their families, they work, or they're a bit older and they're not so keen on like the virtual stuff. So I would say like the way to really activate people is to try and take the community on the like grounds level as much as possible.
Yep.
What we're doing now is talking about like how to actually bring about all the different like subcultures of our country, because we're in 6 regions, the way that we've divided ourselves. And each region has a very distinct dialect, like the language is very different. They have different kinds of music, different kinds of things. Like even traditionally different kinds of clothes that they would wear. So can we organize like twice a year or so, a big meeting, a big event in each different region of the country, and then the people could organize it together, like the local people of that region. So that's like one good way to activate people, is to just throw the ball at them and say, hey, do you want to like showcase what you guys are doing, organize some kind of workshop day or whatever in your land? And I think this is what really excites people, when they get to do something in a concrete way. And it's important that people get to know each other first. It's not easy to get them to like do things unless they've actually built some kind of relationships. So I would say the first thing is just a lot of meetups, and in different places because of the distance. Some people don't want to travel. So try and kind of share in different regions and try and like throw the ball. Okay, now it's your turn. Next month you create this. And
Good. Well, it's good that the focus is more on the in-person real life than the social media. We found a lot of people will post on Telegram, but then when it comes time to show up, like there's this great activist, Morena, who does a lot, and she's organizing these monthly agoras. It's just a little farmer's market vendor thing. And it's the same vendors, and then it's the same people showing up. And, you know, we're showing up to support her and to support the little crew that's there. But it's just a little frustrating that not a lot of people do show up. But as a leader in the movement, we got to take responsibility for how can we make this more sexy? How can we make it more exciting? Maybe we do some live music. Maybe we do a workshop or whatever. But yeah, it's really cool that you were doing that. Sorry, I was trying to get this shot earlier with our guest.
All right.
Me and Ryan here. That's why I was going kind of wonky. So, okay, good. Well, shoot, we've been going for an hour and 40 minutes on the show, and we've had you for an hour and a half almost. So, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Do you want to share I know you have a really cool website for all the stuff that you're doing. Henna Maria. What's
community.
The website? HennaMaria.community.
Yeah.
So yeah, people want to follow Miss Henna, and you're on all the socials, Telegram, and all that stuff. Here, let's
Facebook, Instagram also.
Check it out. It's got some cool designs. The Telly, the Facebooks, the X, the Odyssey. And we need to stream our show to Odyssey when we do it. Oh, you have courses too?
Yeah, I have the activist course. This is really cool. If anyone wants to go through the foundations of how to peacefully and in a creative manner take a stand against all the craziness of our world, then I would really recommend this course. I made it super accessible. It's just 88 euros and it's over 9 hours of content. There's a lot of exercises just from my last 19 years of activism, everything I've basically learned.
Wow.
How to do it in a holistic, inspiring way. So yeah, check it out.
Good for you. Okay, HennaMaria.community, HennaMaria.community. Really appreciate you and the work you're doing. I want to connect more, and I'd love to do it could be on this show or it could be a different format, but it's just let's talk strategy on how to organize these parallel societies, because I think more and more people are coming to this. There's overlap in our things. That was my vision with the Confederation of Freedom Communities thing. So I'd love to connect again and to help
absolutely.
Teach and encourage people, but you're really leading the way. I'm really excited for what you're doing. Thanks, John. Thanks, Ryan. Really amazing to be on the show. And thank you for everything you're doing. I mean, you're just unrelenting with the boom, boom, boom. I check on your channel. I'm 139 unread messages. That's Vanessa who was there chiming in. She's our social media gal. So we have a huge team. So everyone always is how do you do it all, John? I'm I probably do a good 20% of it. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, good for you guys. Keep it up. Okay, we'll be in touch. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Henna.
Thank you.
Bye. Lots of love.
Take care. All right, Mr. Rye Guy, Mr. Ortho. You got any closing words there, Rye Guy?
No, I just want to reiterate that, nothing but love and peace towards Henna and anybody else that has contradictory thoughts to my own. I don't judge anybody else's path. You had to throw a disclaimer out? I have to throw a disclaimer because it seems like people are saying that I'm judging. I don't think I was ever judging Henna. No, and if you look at the comments, it's people that are Christ was the only thing that worked for me, and other people are no, I got a lot of benefit from this plant medicine. I think it's a good mix. It was mainly Vanessa. It was Vanessa who called me out saying that I was judging, which I don't think was fair. But dang, Vanessa jacked you up. Yeah, but either way, I still love Vanessa, and I look forward to the next time us, and Danny all get together. Ryan's either way, I still love you guys. Good luck burning in hell. No, I pray that doesn't happen. I know. I'm kidding. I think it's cool on the show, though. It's kind of just F it. Let's just talk about this stuff that a lot of people think is taboo. And as long as we're all mature and we can talk to each other and you don't get all weird, Ryan. I did get weird. I got weird the last time because everybody, even the comments, they were piling on. Everybody was dogpiling, so I was just I'm honestly impressed. I don't know, your path isn't my path, but I'm impressed with the commitment that you have. I think there's something to be said and to be honored about how devoted you just dove in 110%, go big or go home. So we should be with that. Whatever path we take, if it's starting a new business, an exercise routine, trying to heal an ailing marriage, trying to find God, go all in. What's the point if we're going to half-ass stuff? So kudos on that front. Does make for some good podcast material too. All right, guys. This has been the Live Free Now show, bringing you the news, views, tips, and tools you can use to live free, prosperous, and healthy life. Shout out to Henna Maria, HennaMaria.community, HennaMaria.community. If you're on our email newsletter, we're going to be making a huge announcement tonight.
the show went long. I got to get back to building this giant, awesome, incredibly powerful event that we're really excited to announce tonight or maybe in the morning. If you're not on our email newsletter, livefree.academy/newsletter, livefree.academy/newsletter. Get on the newsletter. Share the show with your friends. Subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube. Next week is our 200th episode. We got to figure something cool out, Ryan. Something cool. Something crazy. Like crazy.
Something nuts. Something people aren't even going to believe.
They're going to be like, what the hell is up with these guys? They're fucking assholes. I'm sorry. We're not supposed to be cussing. It's Lent. All right. Okay. All right. Peace, everybody. Bye.
Bye, y'all. Bye.
Later. Doo-doo-doo-doo.